Hello, this tutorial will be for the SPSS Survival Manual homework for Chapter 16 on multiple regression. Now I'll preface this by saying that it's highly unlikely that you as an undergraduate student will be doing research which calls for a multiple regression analysis. Although I have had a handful of senior projects over the years that did benefit from doing this kind of analysis. That said, multiple regression, as it's, Pallant describes this in your chapter, and you should pay attention to it. Pallant states that she's given you a very simplified outline of multiple regression techniques, and by very simplified, she means seriously simplified. You can spend entire semesters studying multiple regression and various techniques for conducting it and interpreting the output. It's a fairly, as Pallant puts it, unforgiving statistical procedure in SPSS. There are a number of assumptions that the statistic makes that you can't violate. For example, I collected some data last year looking at various predictors of some mental health outcomes for students who were living separated from their pets. And I wanted to see if it was possible for me to do a multiple regression. And I found that my variables were so intercorrelated that they violated the basic assumptions of multiple regression, so I couldn't use the statistic. So just a word to the wise, multiple regression is a technique that involves a lot of learning to use it properly. If you're using it for small numbers of variables and they meet the assumptions of the statistic, then the procedure is pretty straightforward. If, however, you're dealing with lots of variables simultaneously, then you need to really study up on the statistic and understand how it works fully. So this demo is just so you're basically acquainted with how to do a standard, just the basic version of multiple regression using two predictors and one outcome variable. Or another way of putting that is one dependent variable and two independent variables. Lots of multiple regression analyses involve far more complex groupings of variables than that, but we're going to keep it simple because that's the level that you're at as an undergraduate student. So in the homework for this chapter, what I'm asking you to do is essentially change the dependent variable and repeat the example that's provided for you in Chapter 13. So what I have the survey.save data file already open on my computer, and what we want to do, as it states on the homework sheet, we want to look at using life satisfaction as our dependent variable and keeping perceived control of internal states and total mastery as predictor variables or independent variables. And what we want to be able to do is to ask the question, how do these two control variables, control of internal states and mastery, how do they help us to predict someone's score on total life satisfaction? And also, what's their independent contribution to helping us understand variation in total life satisfaction? So to do the analysis, you follow the instructions that are on page 159 in your text. As we've done with lots of our other statistics, you go up to Analyze. This time you go down to Regression, and you select Linear. Then your next step, you want to identify your dependent variable. So that's this box here, and we are using total life satisfaction as our dependent variable. And then we need to identify our two independent variables, and those are going to be total mastery and perceived control of internal states. So we put those in the independent box. Now in some textbooks you will when you're talking about correlational analyses or regression analyses, instead of independent, they may call those variables predictors. And instead of dependent, they may call these variables criterion variables or outcome variables. So just so you know that those synonyms are out there. Next, under method, you make sure that this says enter, and that gives you the standard multiple regression output. Then you click on statistics, and some things are here by default. So you want estimates to be clicked, you want confidence intervals to be clicked. Under model, you want model fit to be clicked. You also want descriptives, part and partial, and collinearity diagnostics. In the residuals section, you want to click on case-wise diagnostics, and it will then highlight outliers outside 3 standard deviations. And then you click continue. Next, you want to click the options button. And in the missing values, you want to exclude cases pairwise. And click continue. On the plot button, you want to click Z residual, and move that into the Y box, and then Z predictor, in the X box, and under standardized residual plots, you want to select normal probability plot option, and then click continue. Next, you want to click on the Save button, and in the section called Distances, you want to select, and I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try. Okay, maybe it's Mahalanobis. You want to select that and Cooks. And then you're going to click Continue, and then you're going to click OK. And that will open up your output. And, you know, output for multiple regressions, I can remember very distinctly the first time I did a regression and thinking, yeah, look at all this stuff for me to try and figure out what it means. Don't panic. Follow the instructions on interpreting the output. So that section in your chapter starts on page 163, where you start with checking your assumptions. You check for multicollinearity by looking at the correlations. Now I'm going to focus on the questions in this tutorial, the questions that I've asked you to answer in your homework, but you can follow along in the recommendations for interpreting the output in your chapter to look at the remainder of the output. But I'm going to focus on what I'm asking you to do for homework. So the first question for homework is, overall, how much of the variance in life satisfaction is explained by the perceived control of internal states scale and the mastery scale? So what we have to look for is the R squared. And that's right here. So you're looking at the model summary, and Pallant identifies, you know, step by step, this is what you should be looking for first. So what we're doing here is saying, how well did these two combined measures, the two control measures, mastery and perceived control of internal states, how much of the differences across people in total life satisfaction do these two control measures explain? Well, the R squared value is 0.225. So how you can interpret that is that indicates that 22.5% of the variability in life satisfaction. So again, what do I mean by variability in life satisfaction? The people in this very large sample, their scores on life satisfaction differ from one another. How much of those differences can be explained by their simultaneous differences in mastery scores and perceived control of internal state scores? So about 22.5% is how much it explains. Now, another way of thinking of that is, okay, that leaves just a little bit over 80% of the differences in life satisfaction scores that are not explained by these two variables. That doesn't mean it's not important, because it's a significant result. It just means that it only explains about 22.5% of what contributes, of all the things in your life that contribute to life satisfaction, how much you perceive that you can control yourself and your emotions, and how much your sense of mastery impacts your total life satisfaction. Now, the next question that I ask you is, which of the independent variables, perceived control of internal states and total mastery, is the best predictor of life satisfaction? And to look at that, you need to look at the standardized coefficient values, the beta values. So we have to scroll down and find those. And that's in the coefficients box on your output. And you're wanting these standardized coefficient values, or beta values. For total mastery, that value is 3.342. And for perceived control of internal states, that value is 0.195. So the stronger predictor is total mastery if we're comparing them with one another. So total mastery explains more of the variability in life satisfaction than does perceived control of internal states. When you look at the combination of the two together do better than one alone. But here you're making a head-to-head comparison. The third question that I've asked you is, do both the variables make a statistically significant contribution to predicting life satisfaction? And there we want to look, same table, we want to look at the significance values. So here you've got 0.000 for each of these variables. Both are less than 0.05, so that means that both mastery and perceived control of internal states make a statistically significant contribution to explaining overall variability in life satisfaction. Now, as I said, in this tutorial I wanted to stick to what I was asking you to do in your homework. You can, applying what's available to you in the remainder of your chapter, look at the steps that Pallant outlines for interpreting the remainder of the output. But that's all you need to do for your actual homework for me. Now, what I would like you to turn or what I would like you to do when you open the quiz space and do this particular homework, I'd like you to write sentences where you are responding to each of the questions that I've indicated for you on your homework, describing the results of your analyses. So that concludes this tutorial.